And we'll begin today by just going over the basics of the fiscal review process, what we look for, and the expectations. So we'll start by why we do trainings or do the reviews. As Representative Payee, we are held responsible by Social Security to ensure that funds are spent in accordance to their policies. This is not a gotcha. We're not out there to try to find mistakes. We want to work together, again, to ensure that we are meeting Social Security's expectations. Social Security has become much stricter in the last few years on what they're looking for, what those expectations are. And as the payee, we are ones responsible to answer to Social Security, but because we pass those funds on to you as the provider, we have to expect those same standards from you. The reason that we do these reviews is to ensure compliance with the provider contracts in regards to service provision and billing for POS services. We look at any waiver services. We only look at general revenue services. MAC will be the reviewer of those waivered services. We review in order to ensure that the expectations are the same across the state. We have providers that serve multiple regions across the state, and we want to make sure that you as the provider are being told and held to the same expectations from one regional office to another. So if you find that you're being told one thing by one regional office and a different thing by another, I do ask that you bring that to the business office lead's attention so that we may address that. We want to work with you to make this as easy as possible. When we look at a fiscal year basis, a minimum of a 3-month period. We look at 100% of all the POS contracted providers that have provided a paid service. 5 individuals receiving those services, or if fewer than 5, all of the individuals receiving the services. Likewise, we'll use the same numbers for our residential providers. We will look at 100% of those providers. Then we'll also look at 5 individuals or all individuals if fewer than 5. I do want to point out that we can extend that review number if needed, if we find something that is questionable or we're not sure if that's going to meet Social Security standards, we can expand that review. Again, not because we're in the gotcha mode, we just want to ensure that we're following all standards. So for individual funds, those are the personal allowance, the funds that you receive every month from the individual's benefits. Could be $30 on up. It also includes the wages of the individual. In ISL, it also includes those ISL room and board accounts. Auxiliary funds paid to residential providers on behalf of an individual. For example, this individual wears clothing, and so we add in $30 extra a month for clothing costs. We will look at those funds to make sure that they're not too much accumulated and that they are being spent accordingly. But you will need to report those funds when you do your quarterly reporting. Monetary gifts received by the individual will also count towards the Medicaid and Social Security resource limits. So those need to be reported. And then any other account maintained on behalf of the individual. All of these, as I said, are considered resources and do count against the Medicaid and Social Security resource limit. In the past, you've typically heard us talk mostly about the Medicaid limits, and recently those limits have increased over the last 2 years. And now the Medicaid maximum of $3,000 is over the Social Security resource limit of $2,000. Now we still have to look at that $2,000 threshold, even the Medicaid allowance has gone up. So one of the things that we get questioned about quite a bit is wages. So Social Security is not the reason that we are reviewing those wages. Social Security is only concerned about the individual's benefits. We are reviewing those wages per your contract for services that says you need to maintain records and receipts of funds that you hold in trust of the individual. Individuals that like to handle their own funds, and that is addressed in the individual plan. So it can be stated that this person can handle their own wages. I want to point out that you as the provider should try to keep receipts and maintain records on those wages just in order to protect yourself. It's always better to have too much than not enough. Individual does not want to cooperate or feels that they're being held back by working with you on their wages, make notes of that. And when the individual cashes their check, go ahead and have a ledger or something for the wages that the individual and staff person can sign. As I stated, these wages do need to be included in your quarterly reports of balances. I want to ensure that the wages are kept separate from other funds. And the reason for that is because if an individual is getting close to reaching the source limit for Social Security, we'll ask that you send some excess funds back to the regional office so we can work to get the funds back down to within resources. And we don't want the individual's wages to be part of the funds that are sent back to us. So, and you need to keep those separate so you know what funds are being spent for what items. Reviews are sent into the regional office for the folks that we serve as payee. It's expected that if we are not the payee should be asking you to submit the information to them because they will be the ones that have to address Social Security. Those ledgers in, we will review them for accuracy. We're going to make sure that there is the beginning and ending balances match should have been carried forward. We're going to check for mathematical errors. So, and the main thing is checking for the eligibility again to make sure that we're not jeopardizing any type of benefit eligibility. We're going to look for the required information on those ledgers, and I'll get into that a bit further. But a couple of the things that we're going to look at are signatures and the intended spending, and again, I'll address those. So, personal spending ledger, then you're going to have your cumulative running balance. Timely deposits. When you receive your SCL payments that include the personal spending, in the case of ISLs, the room and board funds, we want to see that those are deposited quickly. There definitely should not be a week or two lag between that. You get the deposit and you should immediately deposit that into the individual's ledger accounts. We're going to look for the item or the service to be purchased. For example, if an individual is going to Walmart to purchase a TV, we want to see that the purpose is a TV. Any transactions must indicate the intended purpose. So if you're giving out, let's say, $10 for folks to go to garage sales, obviously it's pretty difficult to get receipts at garage sales. So what you will do is on your ledger, you indicate the purpose of that $10 is to go to garage sales. A lot of folks just like to carry change with them so they can get a soda from a machine. Again, just put this type of descriptions the intended purpose. Social Security is really adamant at looking at that purpose if there's not receipts. And it can be documented by receipts. So if, for example, you do get receipts for part of that $10, make sure you hang on to those. And look for the staff person and individual's signatures. We will go over signatures in a bit because that, again, is something Social Security is really looking at. So a sample ledger that has been provided by Social Security. We don't mandate that you use a specific ledger. We do require specific information on those ledgers, but the format that you use is it works best for you. I know a lot of our providers have their ledgers on electronic files, which is fine. However, if you do that, you need to keep some sort of cash disbursement log like you're seeing now in the home, that anytime cash is dispensed, you get those signatures. Files electronically, there are ways to get those signatures unless you would actually print out each time. So if you just maintain this cash disbursement log, you can submit that along with your ledgers to meet Social Security guidelines. Ledger is also just a sample of we received from Social Security. It's strictly for your in and outs. It doesn't have the signatures. So this would need to be used in conjunction with a different ledger that has signatures. And you're going to see it's got the date, the description, a running cumulative balance, and you're going to see your debits and credits going into the account. And then the is just another sample ledger. This would be used if you are not using an electronic files and you will have all of your information on one document. We do accept these. I see a question asking if electronic signatures are allowed, and that is no. Social Security does not accept electronic signatures. It has to be the actual signature, both of the individual, if they are able to, and of the staff person. And I have a question on wages that are reported quarterly. And the question is, do you just want the balance? And yes, that is fine. The individual is made their own records. Okay. I have separate another question. Can we receipts to show signatures? And we have to have original signatures. So if you have original signature on the receipts and you send us and we're able to keep those original receipts, that suffices. But Social Security is adamant that original signature is maintained. Another question, what funds were meant when stated that wages should be kept separate? So when you're reporting all of your available funds that you're holding for that individual, they need to be broken out. So how much is personal spending? How much is wages? How much is room and board accounts? Going to ask that wages be sent back to the regional office. We can use to maintain eligibility. Then an electronic record and scanning in receipts with staff and individual signatures, original receipts be kept. And yes, because we do have to have original signatures. Social Security is requiring us to have our original signatures. Written receipts acceptable for cash to the individual. At any point, does the supported individual need to sign any printed or handwritten receipts? If the individual is receiving cash, they should definitely sign for that cash. It's always best to err on the side of caution. So if you have those receipts, go ahead and get them signed. More is better in this case. Social Security is just wanting to ensure that the individual truly is getting the funds they should be, and they are receiving the goods that is intended. One more question, and then we're going to move on. And again, as Heike stated, these will be compiled and put out on our frequently asked questions. Question is, you stated that wages would not be requested back to stay with eligibility, yet asked to send back a balance anything over $500. We ever been told to leave out wages? The $500, that's not a set in stone number. We just have to look at all available resources to ensure the individual is benefit eligible. So while the wages are included in the bills that you submit, we don't have to ask the individual to send us their wages. Excess funds, we take that from whatever is left from their personal spending or the ISL room and board account. And we're going to just go and spend that money on rehab days without ensuring that the individual has all the needs that they are met. For example, bill insurance is something that we always look into to make sure that the individual has the adequate coverage for burial and funeral expenses. So I'm going to and move on, and then as time allows, we'll try to come back to some of these questions. And just another sample ledger. Your regional offices all have access to these sample ledgers. So if you want to use one of these ledgers, feel free to contact your local regional office and ask them for those ledgers. So what to look for during the individual funds review? First, we're going to verify that individual funds are commingled with provider funds. That's a contract requirement. So if, for example, you are a group home, or an ISL, we're going to make sure that the ISL room and board accounts are not in the same account as your rehab payments or general operating funds. The funds to be separated out. We're to verify that the expenses charged to the individuals are appropriate. Items that should be provided by the contractor included. For example, a group home is there to provide the personal care items for an individual. So let's say this provider provides Crest toothpaste. Individual wants Colgate. Individual can go out and purchase that particular brand of toothpaste if they make that choice. But we must ensure that the provider does offer a toothpaste to the individual. We're also going to make sure that there is no overdraft charges. The individual's account should never be in the negative. We're going to verify that receipts exist for all purchases. As earlier, if there is no receipt, we're going to make sure that the ledger entry indicates the intended purpose for cash as well as the signatures that are required. We're also going to verify that in purchases totaling $100 or more per day from funds held at the home have the approval from the Representative Payee or the designee, which we designated the service coordinator as ones that can give that approval. Now, that $100 total does not include for trees. If the home goes out once a month, say, and tries to buy the majority of their groceries, their bill very likely could be over $100. That is excluded. If you are going, let's say, to St. Louis to shopping for the day, more than likely you may spend over $100. ahead and get the approval from the service coordinator to spend over that amount for your shopping. If you don't spend much, that's okay. That if you do though, you are covered by that. We're also going to ensure that funds are returned to the regional office within 30 days of death or move of individual, and that is in your contract for services. And that also is something that Social Security looks for. When Social Security comes out and does a review for regional offices, it never fails. They always select at least one individual that has passed away. And they're going to look to see if we got those funds back. This is an area that definitely we need to get better in. So we need to ask your assistance in doing that and getting those funds returned just as quickly as possible. We are going to also verify that your bank statement is reconciled monthly. And along with that is making sure there is enough cash in the bank account to cover what the ledger says. You got cash on hand to cover those balances. And I carried costs earlier. We're going to look to make sure that there are more than 2 months worth of accumulated funds. So the example I gave was the $30 a month for clothing. Individual has $90 built up. We're going to go and ask for 30 of that back. We're also going to make sure that that $30 is spent just for the clothing or the intended purpose. We have a lot of ancillaries set up for prescription copays. So paying the provider upfront X dollars per month on behalf of an individual for their prescription costs. So we're going to look at that and make sure that, again, there's not funds accumulating. And we're also going to make sure that it strictly has been used for prescriptions. We're going to find room and board expenditures for ISLs. We're going to look at appropriateness of the expense. Let's say, for example, the individual ISL is only funded for basic cable. Yet we see that every month we're paying for a premium cable package. We're going to need to investigate that a little further to see if that, first of all, if the individual can actually afford to pay that premium package. Is it something that has been approved and something that the individual actually has expressed an interest for and not being provided for staff? Also going to make sure that expenses are split between housemates. Make sure that the electric bill, for example, if you've got 3 folks, it's split evenly between the 3 individuals living at the home. To ensure that all required information is included on the ledger. And I know I sound like a broken record, but Social Security, again, is just really being strict on their expectations. And because of that, we have to pass that on to you guys as well. And then finally, we're going to, again, look for that Medicaid and Social Security eligibility to ensure that that is not in jeopardy. quite a bit about signatures. In cash is dispersed, you must have the signatures of the individual that is receiving cash sign, as well as a staff person. If the individual is unable to sign their name, that will be noted on the ledger, as well as having two staff sign that ledger. Full names are required. You can't just initial and be done. Recently, we've had a question on the stamps, and we did inquire with Social Security, and those two are not acceptable. It has to be original signatures. And these, you have to have receipts to support all spending. Just if I can't stress enough the importance of maintaining those receipts and of getting those receipts back into the regional office. We have ledger entries. We can't, if we can't get the receipts, we need to have documentation as to what happened with those funds. So let's say that you request $50 and get receipts back totaling $45. We need to have documentation of what that extra $5 was used for. Whether you deposited it back into the home account, you know, that $5 deposit with a note of what it was for. You could note that the individual kept the change and then get the signatures, or you could document that you sent the funds back to the regional office. Social Security does look for that entire trail of the funds. They must, and they look for documentation of every penny. Social Security has, and they will require payback. In some cases, if there aren't receipts, there's no documentation that individual actually did purchase that TV for $300, or individual didn't receive their personal spending money, Security will require a payback. So it's just imperative that we have that documentation. So that concludes the portion of the review related strictly to the individual funds. Now I'm going to talk about the POS reviews. Again, this is for your general revenue services that are authorized through Seymour. With our reviews, we're going to look for all required education and training. We're going to look for driver's license. We're going to look for insurance, proof of citizenship. Any that is a staff requirement as outlined in the service definitions. We're going to review the progress notes to make sure they're complete and that they include the name of the individual receiving the service, and is the full name, not the nickname or initials. It needs to be the full legal name. We're going to look for the date the service was provided, as well as the times that those services were provided, an actual start and end time. We're going to want the correct name of the service as it's on the service definition. to look for signatures to that the staff are signing off on the notes, to look for any attendance sheets to support that billing. We're not facilitative staff, so we're not going to go out to determine if the correct code was necessarily. We are going to look at documentation to support the code that you provided. Now, if we're out and we see that you are clearly providing on-site and it's authorized as off-site, we're going to bring that up at when we turn to the regional office and talk to your service coordinator. So, end of both the POS and the individual funds review, if we meet you on site, we're going to go ahead and let you know what our findings are, if any. We're going to just give you a feel for what's found. We follow up with a formal letter, and that would include any necessary follow-up on your behalf. We're giving you the opportunity to send comments back to the regional office regarding these findings. So if you don't agree with something, bring it up and we'll work through that. And finally, if necessary, we're now entering Fiscal fundings into the apps system. So if there are no receipts, if we've requested ledgers, quarterly ledgers, and have not received them, they'll be recorded in apps. Again, as I stressed at the beginning, this is not got you. These are requirements from either your contract or Social Security, so we have got to that follow-up. Thing is just give some resources. As Heike mentioned, on the website, there is a frequently asked questions section that these questions will be compiled and answered and placed on the frequently asked questions, as well as this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to review that. So you have access to Division Directive 5.070, which is the directive that spells out the review process. On Security's website is a great resource. We refer to that often. There is a guide for Representative Payees. So you can look at that guide and see that those expectations and that we are following what is mandated. And then your local regional offices can contact your business office lead in your area, or I'm sure you guys have all got some contacts from the local Fiscal Review staff. But if there are questions, and what we are trying to do is anytime a regional office gets a question from a provider, we are going to update that frequently asked question site freely, and I would encourage you to go to that site if you have a question. We really are working to ensure that we are holding everybody to the same standards, and we want the information that is given out to be consistent. So that's why we're trying to really put more out there for you and feel free to also, again, ask questions of your regional office. That concludes my portion of the presentation. What we will do, because we have a lengthy list of questions, I just compile those and get answers and post those as quickly as possible. There may be some that I have to research the answers to, so I'll get those out as quickly as possible. Thank you for participating, and I look forward to working with you. So.